If you're putting together a strategy or if you're giving input to your government, have a healthy bias towards action. I usually call this an action-oriented approach. And you might think, well, that's fairly obvious until you start to read strategies. I like to say that the whole purpose of developing a national strategy is not to create a document. It's to create change. And so you'll read a lot of documents that sound good. And people will sometimes send me that document and say, is this a good national strategy? And I'll say, well, ask me in a year or 2 or 3. Because if nothing happens, it wasn't a good national strategy. So it's not a good statement to say, well, we had a great document, but nothing happened. No, you didn't have a great document then. And that's to say that from the minute you start putting words and concepts together, the idea of action needs to be in the DNA of the document, the people you bring together. Don't put anything in there that someone's not going to agree to do later. And feel free, I'll give you permission, to mix tactics with strategies. The MBAs may not like that, but oh well. Be specific. Give who's supposed to do something and when are they supposed to do it. If you don't set up the marker for success or failure, you have no accountability. Community is key. I sometimes say a financial literacy strategy is a good excuse to build a community. You can bring nonprofits, for-profits, a lot of organizations together to discuss this. They have a purpose. And with any luck, that community continues after the document is done, because those people are going to help you implement the document. So give me your ideas today, and then give me your action tomorrow. And a community is always going to be important, no matter how big your government is. You need organizations that are not government. Turf battles among agencies, ministries. Some people will say to me, well, we're having problems, and they'll kind of admit it sheepishly that this agency wants this part of financial literacy, this agency or ministry wants that part. And that could be a bad situation because they don't share and they fight over this topic. But you know what a worse situation is? Nobody fighting, nobody caring. And back in 2006, the last time I was on this stage, that was probably more common than it is now. So I would much rather have too much energy around financial literacy at the government level than not enough. I'd rather tame a wild horse than try to revive a dead one. And so we have government agencies that are interested in this. The securities people are interested in obviously teaching one thing. The central banks have a certain bias of what their products are. The consumer regulator, great. Get them all together. Help the soloist play as a symphony. Consumer-centric, I think Hope picked up on this, and I just want to echo it. This is all about the consumer at the end of the day. We need to see it from their perspective. We need to see when they are in the informal market, and we want them to get into the mainstream, into the formal market. Don't view that as a disease. I think the professor said that, something similar to that yesterday, that we have to fix. Because a disease, usually the afflicted person wants to be helped. They know they're sick. People in the informal sector are in the informal sector because it's worked. If we bring out all the same metrics we do to every other program, the informal sector is sustainable, check. Is it at scale? Yes, it is, sadly. So it's been around for a while. I was recently in Myanmar, and a colleague was saying to me, gee, I wonder why only 6% of the people are in the formal system. And my question was, why isn't it 0? What got the first 6% involved in this? That's what interests me more. So come at it from their perspective, that this works, I live in this village, this is how I've gotten things done for years, why should I change? Instead of presuming that, well, this is the right way to do it, of course they'll want to change. Go from their perspective. So I know that puts a heavier burden on you to take it from their perspective, but I think you'd rather carry a heavy burden than fall in a pitfall later when we realize, gee, we've done everything and nothing's changing, because we're not looking at their perspective, and a strategy should take that into account. Very quickly, let me go through the 2 different types, and I think I've kind of highlighted this already. 2 models for strategy development. So if you government types in the room, please note. One is a mountaintop, and the other is a little more collaborative. And let me tell you, the reason why this comes about is regulators have a certain bias. I usually say bias is the flip side of expertise. It's what they're good at. Fish swim, birds fly, regulators regulate. They come into work every day and they pass rules and they enforce those rules. Financial literacy is not about enforcing rules. This usually isn't by statute. You have to work with other organizations, you have to persuade, you can't rule. And that's what we're asking regulators to do, which is frequently outside of their comfort zone. So, mountaintop, edicts from on high, top-down decisions, very general, a national strategy. I like to say a national strategy shouldn't be like your national anthem. It shouldn't be vague. I listen to my national anthem and I'm inspired, but I don't know what to get up and do tomorrow morning. Some national strategies read that way. They're very high level, they're very inspiring, but they give us no direction. So specificity is helpful. Under the mountaintop, we have small groups of government experts, an exercise of power, executed with the spirit of compliance. That works for banking regs, doesn't work for financial literacy. So the alternative is a contractual relationship, bringing these parties together, getting them to make agreements. You negotiate what the strategy is among stakeholders. You have a broad-based consensus. Specific objectives, organizations held accountable for identifiable tasks. Inclusive, government, NGOs, private sector. I think we heard about in Fiji that many different agencies found a way to work together. That's important. It's not an exercise of power, but one of influence. And then it's executed with a spirit of cooperation instead of compliance. So hopefully that kicks up a little dust and gives us things to talk about.